Welcome to Reinventing-U. I'm your host, Danielle Silverman. I believe that in today's world of ever-constant evolution, the only career change that matters is when what you do matches who you are and what you believe. This show is where you'll learn how embracing change and reinventing yourself will help you navigate any disruptions and lead a life of happiness and fulfillment, especially in this ever-changing world. Your purpose and your meaning will drive your personal transformation. As I like to say, it's your vision, your life. Be passionate about it. Reinventing-U starts now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Reinventing-U, a podcast where we talk about all things career-related. My name is Danielle Silverman, and my mission is to have people find work that matches who they are so that they can live a happier and more fulfilled life, a life that's going to bring meaning and peace to themselves and to the world. What we're going to talk about today is something that I think is critically important. Excuse me, I have something on my lip. Is something that is critically important for anybody in their career today, because as I've said in multiple podcasts in the past, the world is changing, continuing to change, and even at an even faster pace. The life cycle of an organization has become very short, and as a consequence, your careers are changing as well, the life cycle of your career. So you could be in a job for 2 years or 3 years before changing again, whereas once your parents' generation, for example, could have been in a job for 30 years and then, gotten the gold watch at the end. Today, that's no longer so. And so it becomes critical to understand how it is you're going to look for a job. What has changed? What are some of the things that we need to pay attention to? And so today I've invited a guest, JoAnne Marlow, who is oh my goodness, what does JoAnne do? You know what? I'm going to let JoAnne speak for herself because, I don't think there's anything better than what comes from a person's own experience. So JoAnne Marlow, welcome to Reinventing-U. It's such a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you, Danielle. This is truly a wonderful opportunity. So
why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what is it about job searching that inspires you?
Well, we have to go back a few years, like when I was about 22, just a couple of years and some months. I grew up in a time when women were not considered business women at all. I was in a class in economics and commerce with 80 men and 4 women. So I definitely know what it's like to work very hard, to try to rise to the top of the class, all of that thing. And then, went through some interviews, and to my shock, some of the questions were, do you have a boyfriend? Is it serious? And being a very confident woman at that stage in my life, I said, I'm curious. I said, why do I need a partner for this job? Anyway, fast forward for that one, I said, yeah, thank you, but I don't think we're aligned. And I went back to university and got my teaching certification, became a teacher. And during the decision of what am I going to teach, I took a look at, it was always going to be business, but I looked at the textbook and I put them right back in the big boxes, shoved them in cupboards, and started writing my own curriculum. But during that time of research, I learned that 8 out of 10 people in Canada at that time were unhappy in their jobs. Oh. And I was so excited about what I was doing. I couldn't even imagine how people could have a job that they disliked and stay there. So way back then, I made it my purpose to change those statistics, even if it was one person at a time.
Wow, and how things have not changed since then.
So what's the
time when people were happy in their jobs?
Yeah. The sad thing is, you're right, those statistics have not changed that much. They've gone up or down depending on the economy,
Yeah.
but people still don't know how to find their ideal job in the work market.
Mhm.
And over the years, I've developed lots of models, business models, that kind of thing. I have been an educator. I started teaching grade 12s, and then I moved to teaching university students. Now I do both. I teach university students, most of them international students. So, I mean, there's a huge influx of international students and new arrivals into Canada and the US. And I figured they need more help than anybody because we're a totally different system and market. So,
yeah.
so I have been developing solutions, not just for them, but also I'm looking at a trilogy in my latest book to look at new arrivals and then also people who are just wanting to upgrade, to get promoted, to find their first job. And so that's, I'm a professional speaker, I'm a career coach, you know, who needs to know
We have
all
a
of
lot
that?
of things in common, let's put it that way. Well, some might even call us competitors, but I don't. In
No.
today's world, we have to cooperate on everything.
Oh, there's always lots of people out there that need to be served.
That's right. And I think, well, I know you also have done a lot of work on multi-generational effects and within organizations. So, and that is actually the situation today as well. There are a lot of people in, you know, millennials, from millennials to baby boomers, who are working sometimes on the same team. And I think you've written a book about that, if I'm not mistaken.
I have, and it was a bestseller when I wrote it in 2017. But you know what? It's still relevant because not much has changed, other than the Gen Y, the millennials are now up to 43 years of age. But Gen Z is also in the workplace, and some traditionalists or silent generations. Those are people who are over 76, and some of them are still working, and so it could be 5 generations. So
wow.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I'm doing more presentations now on dialogue between the decades because the older generations just are not communicating with the younger generations and don't know why.
That's a shame. That's a very, very useful work that you're doing. JoAnne, before we go into the meat of our conversation today, which is going to be about the job search process itself, I understand you have a special gift for our listeners.
Oh, I'm so excited. And it doesn't matter who the person is that wins this prize, but I have just finished my 10th book.
Wow. And I want to be you when I grow up.
Me too. I'm never going to grow up. I'm pretty sure of that. But the title of the book is How to Find Your Ideal Job in a New Country, a detailed guide for international students. But truly, it is written in a very conversational way. It's loaded with tips on how to figure out who you are as a person so you can relay that information during an interview, put in your cover letters, tons of cover letters and resume samples, how to negotiate, how to go through your interviews, all the questions you need to have answers for. So it is at the publishers as we are speaking and will be on Amazon probably in September. So I'm very excited about that, and a copy of that book is going to be my gift.
That's amazing. So if you're interested in getting a book, please just write to us. I think we're just going to take the names at random. I'll cut them up in little pieces, put them in a hat and pick up a name, and then we'll send it to you. So please send us your name and your address, your email address and your home address so that we can send this to you. Thank you very much for that gift, JoAnne. You know, it makes me think that, well, first of all, I know how much research, actual research you put into the book. So that in itself, for me, is, testament to how good the book is. But I'm also thinking of using it as a textbook for my upcoming class, which is going to be in September, and that's going to be the Not So Ordinary Job Search Formula. How to make your job search fun, and land the job you want. So in that sense, I think, oh, hey, it might be ideal.
That would be awesome.
We'll talk further about that. So our purpose today is really to talk about the job search process, because people have to change jobs so often. This is, I believe, has become a necessary skill in today's world. Just like, kids learning how to budget or how to manage their money, which is not taught in schools.
No.
I believe it should be. I also believe this is something that should be taught. And so let's dive into that a little bit more. First of all, when people think about the job search process, they get worried. So what to you is the most common misperception that people have about the job search process?
I think what I am seeing is people don't know what their strengths or skills are and how to communicate those effectively. They don't practice the answers to interview questions. They haven't written out even a story about who they are. So even the simplest question that is often asked, so tell me about yourself, is, I was born and then I had 16 brothers and sisters and I have 2 dogs. That's not relevant. That's not what the employer wants to hear. So they have not. So a couple of things. They don't know who they are to eloquently decide what jobs to apply for. And they don't know how to communicate, and they don't practice. Finding a job is a job. And when I coach, I tell my clients, I said, this is going to be some of the hardest work you've ever done, because it's self-reflection, getting to know yourself, doing some assessments, writing out a resume. And you've got 6 seconds to impress an employer. And if your resume in those 6 seconds doesn't look absolutely professional, you're going to get put in the dumping pile.
Yeah. So they don't know who they are, generally speaking. They don't know how to communicate who they are. Well, that's one comes from the other. If you don't know who you are, then it's very hard to communicate. And they don't practice. So practice is, unfortunately, is a very difficult thing to do. So it's very important, especially in preparing for interviews.
Yeah, and I have a solution for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
I'd love to hear it.
You will. Right now? Right now?
Whatever you like.
Okay. Well, I can tell you a quick story. I had a friend who was forced into changing jobs and had a fabulous opportunity to get a great job. And he was so nervous. So I prepared, the basic questions as well as behavioral questions. And I insisted that he write out his answers to every single one of those questions. And then whenever we were together, I would just shoot out those questions and he had to answer them spontaneously. And he did get the job. But one of the wonderful things that he said was, if it hadn't have been for that practice, I never would have been as confident at the interview. So I believe you write down all your answers, then leave them, then you go back and you fine tune them in better language that is much more less scripted and more you. And then you practice them, and you practice by reading them out loud. You have to get as many of your senses talking about. You need to involve your senses. So your eyes, your ears, and your mouth. By answering out loud, your brain hears yourself. I practice in front of the mirror. I've gone through big interviews this year as I changed universities, and I teach full-time at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. So, and they're getting the same thing that I'm saying on this podcast as well. Have to practice.
Yes, and I do exactly the same thing, by the way. It has to be written down. Absolutely. Yeah. So given that, thank you for that. I think it's, and we may come back to it again, but there's so many things to talk about. I don't even know if we're going to be, if 1 hour is going to be enough. When you talk about most people not knowing who they are, it's difficult to then figure out what it is, what kind of job will align with who they are. So how do they do that? How do they find a career that aligns with their values, their purpose, even their vision?
Well, when I mentioned that I found my purpose at age 22, I mean, my purpose is very clear. I sort of told you how I got it, but not to mention anything more about my purpose other than this is feeding my purpose. I think, a person starts to realize why they're on this earth anyway. What skills and strengths do they have? Not just that they've developed, but also innately. So I'm highly organized, and that I didn't necessarily learn. I've always been very organized. Communication is my top strength. So it's so easy for me to talk to others, to be on a podcast, all that kind of stuff. But there are 2 books that made a huge difference for me. One of them is Find Your Why, or Start with Why, by Simon Sinek.
Yeah.
Because he really does go through the process. And what it did for me is it validated I was on the right track. But for many others, it stirred those questions in their mind. How do I find my purpose? How do I figure out what I'm passionate about? And then you say, is that marketable? Is that employable? Yeah. So knowing your cause, really, really important. And another book that made a huge difference for me is Discover Your Strengths.
Oh, yes.
And that's by I've got it right in front of me. It's by Donald Clifton. He's with Gallup. I have used my results from that assessment, and that was in my mind the secret to getting the job I wanted. So we can talk more about that later, but
we can, for sure. But those are 2 excellent resources: Simon Sinek's Find Your Why, and the Clifton Strengths book, Now Discover Your Strengths. I forget his first name, but Donald Clifton. So he runs the Gallup organization, which I use their reports every year on the state of the workplace, in the state of the global workplace. Extraordinary work that he's done there. But you can also use many other kinds of assessments, if you will.
Yes.
And whether you do it by yourself or you work with a coach, it's always a very good idea to go through that process to really figure out what it is that aligns with who you are.
Yeah, I've had so much success when coaching, because it truly is one-on-one. It can be done in a small group too. But, as as a career coach as well, you push them forward gently, and their confidence will just soar as a result of them getting closer and closer to their passion. Sometimes it's a whack on the side of the head. Sometimes it's a cause. Sometimes that's important to me and I need to do something about it.
Yeah.
And that was what triggered me. I needed to do something about it.
Yeah. That's amazing that you've had this passion so young.
I am so fortunate. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Because a lot of people don't find out until much, 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 much later. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how getting into the job search process itself when we come back from the break. See you soon. So, JoAnne, let's dive into the real process of the job search. And as we do this, I recognize, first of all, that there are a lot of challenges today in this post-pandemic world. But there are also opportunities. So what do you see as some of the biggest challenges and some of the best opportunities for job seekers in this post-pandemic world?
Well, from the job seeker's point of view, fear is one of the biggest barriers that they have right now. Fear that they're not going to get the job, fear that they're going to be they're going to do poorly in the interview, the fear of how am I going to support myself. A lot of newcomers to Canada are saying, you know, I've got this degree and yet I'm limited in the types of jobs that I have to accept for a while. People are willing to take any old job. And I remember doing that when I was a young adult, but I certainly, was I happy all the time? No, but there's a way to gradually, no matter what position you're in, whether you're an entry-level person or a newcomer, or you're in the workplace for years and years, if I liken it to shopping. If you look in your closet and you don't see anything in particular and you just go shopping for a sale, everything is fair game. But if you know that you need a blue shirt or blouse, when you go shopping, you're not going to look at any other color than blue. And so that's what knowing who you are and what you can offer a company, that's where that works. Because all the other peripheral kinds of jobs are not yours. You have to only look for what excites you. So it's a lot of inward work that you need to do even before you start writing a resume or looking for jobs. And, you know, people don't realize that they need to do the work. I'm finding that. They're also not getting help in writing a resume or a cover letter. They're missing a lot of steps. And so the fear definitely is real. So one of the things that I always recommend is you need to do some self-reflection, some assessments, have some guidance. Maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a friend. It might be a mentor from a business, but you definitely need that help to do the work that's there.
Absolutely.
On the other side, on the flip side, from the HR or recruiting side, they're getting hundreds and hundreds of resumes daily that they may not even read. It may be AI that's scanning the resumes. And I'm hearing, which distresses me a little, that many recruiters are so overwhelmed with this pile of stuff that even if the scanning machine shoots out 10 resumes that say, hey, you need to take a look at these, they're relying on AI to make the decision, not their own human instincts. That is disturbing to me. I don't want to.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge in today's world. Absolutely.
It is. And a recruiter's job is to choose the right person. And even if they get them down to 10, by not reading at least their skills summary or their profile or finding out who that person is, they could be missing out on some fabulous candidates.
Yes. And it's interesting because once upon a time, I used to tell people, well, what you try and do is put yourself in front of the person physically, like go to the office, go to the office of this company and hand in your resume by hand, right?
That's in my book too. I agree.
Yes, but unfortunately today, when you're applying to an online job, they don't give the name of the person that you're supposed to send it to. You just send it anonymously to info@ or HR@. And when you try calling the company, some will give you the name. I tell people to call anyway. Some will give you the person's name, but some refuse to. So it's how do you work around that sort of dilemma?
I can tell you another story about that one.
Okay. So can I, but let's hear yours.
Yeah, it's short. I was in a situation where I didn't know the person's name. So I went on the company website and I looked up who are the HR managers. Yeah. And if you don't know the one that's actually placing the ad, usually if you find out who the senior HR manager is and you address it to them, it will filter down to the right person. in this case, the website for applying for a job I was interested in was down. And so I wasn't able to apply online. So I thought, okay. So I brought one of my books, How to Hire and Retain Millennials. And I put that in with my resume and my cover letter in a nice package, all folded, not folded, but all flat in a container or a big envelope. I drove down to the company and I couldn't even get up to the HR department. It was the security guard. And I said, you may not know, but the website is down and I wasn't able to apply online. Would you be able to deliver this to the right person? And it did have a name, and it did. I never got a thanked at all, but I had 3 wonderful interviews with that company. And so sometimes you just have to take initiative and go the extra mile. I used to years ago go, thinking, okay, here's a tall building, there's got to be somebody in here who wants me. So I would hand pick the names and the floors and the companies, and I would have a little file of resumes and general cover letters, and I'd go up to the top and I'd work myself down through the building. So that was haven't done that recently, but it's something I could recommend.
Yeah, it's not something that people are drawn to today.
No, they have to be totally ready for an interview just in case. A lot of people do that in, if they're going into retail or hospitality, they can definitely do that.
Yes, that's true. And a lot of people are afraid of doing it. Many introverts, for example, would not naturally lean towards that. So it's a question of, getting them used to that.
That's right. Finding the right person. I just another thought came to mind. Going on LinkedIn to the company and finding out, just asking who's HR and look for that. Going on Google or going to the corporate website. You really have to take initiative, because you don't want to be alone in this. You want to be empowered to do what's right. So that'll help too.
Yeah. In a very recent case, I had a client who wanted to teach, actually, and knew exactly where and in what domain, because it was something that she'd studied and worked in for the past 7 years, I think, or something like that. And she actually knew somebody who worked at that university, but this person wasn't the person who was hiring. She was just somebody she knew. So she went in person to hand her resume to this person that she knew, and the person said, "You know what? I think I know the person who was doing the hiring, and they are looking right now." So she just happened to be in the right place at the right time. This woman handed my client's resume to the right person, and within a week she was hired.
That's awesome.
That was 6 months ago. She has now been offered a tenure position at the university.
Oh, that's fabulous.
So it works.
It definitely works. You always look for referrals. You never know who lunches with whom or plays pickleball. And, so always let your family, your colleagues, your friends know that that is something that the type of job you're looking for, the companies that you're looking at, and ask for help.
Ask for help, not for a job. Because if people don't have a job to give you, they feel bad. I truly believe that people genuinely want to help. But if they can't give you what you're looking for, they feel bad. So if you go, yeah, seriously. So if you go and you ask people, "Oh, can you give me a job?" Or "Do you know somebody who can give me a job?" They walk away embarrassed.
Yeah.
But if you're asking for help, or you can say, or you find out about who this person is and say, "You know what, maybe I can help you with this," and just offer your time to help them, they will remember that.
Absolutely.
And they will then go and "Oh, you know what, I know this person. She helped me before in this particular, maybe she'd be good for that."
That's right. So, networking, even if you're at a social event, network, let people know that you're looking for work. Do they know of anyone? Another little secret, well, maybe it's not a secret, but one of the things that I always recommend is informational interviews.
Yes.
So a person that, like, one of the things to do is go on a job search, Indeed or monsters.com or Simply Hired. There are so many right now. And go on there and just sort of do a tour, plug in a job that you think you might like to do, and then read the job descriptions that the employers are asking for. You may see, like I did with some of the companies I applied to, that they're constantly, over the last couple of months, asking for more and more people. I was looking for organizational development jobs. And so I changed the name of the title and got all kinds of great juicy information so that I could look for keywords. Do I have these skills? Does this excite me? And then thinking, okay, that's a company I want to have an interview with. Then you phone. I've got a full script and all the questions, but an informational interview is basically you're interviewing a person whose job you may be interested in doing someday. It's not like, hi, I want your job. It's, can you tell me about your career? How did you start? What skills and strengths do you feel are really necessary for this job? What are the good points of your day? And what are attributes that you don't particularly like? For a person starting in this career, what kind of salary can they expect? So all kinds of rude questions you'd never ask in a real interview, but because you are interviewing them for information, not for a job,
right,
you will go away with more information. When I changed from teaching to go into management, that was a brand new world for me. I had 12 interviews that I performed, and I had 2 job offers.
Wow.
And I took one and I became a division manager for a global company. So that was very exciting to be able to use that method to learn. There were a couple of jobs that I never wanted to do that. And some that I thought, oh, this sounds right down my alley. And the job I took was perfect. Yeah. Never expected to get a job offer, but took my resume anyway. And then towards the end, I said, would you mind just taking a glance at my resume and giving me any advice that you might have on how to improve? And so when they would look and read and say, oh, this is very good, or got a typo here. And
good feedback. That's excellent feedback.
Fabulous feedback. And then I would always say, would you mind keeping a copy of that resume just in case some of your colleagues are looking for somebody like me? So that again is asking for more help, but man, did that work. People said, no problem. In a couple of cases, people got on the phone right away and said, Hank, you need to meet this girl. So, you have to use your critical thinking skills.
Yes.
How can I get a job? And how can I do it properly and intelligently so that I'm not just saying, yeah, I'll do anything. No, you won't. You won't be happy and you'll leave after 3 days.
Yes, critical informational interviews are critical in the process because you're learning and you're meeting people, you're learning about the marketplace. It's especially critical for people who want to change industries. You've been working in the same industry for 10 years, 15 years, and you realized, and the pandemic has done this, made us realize that what we were doing is just doesn't fit anymore. It doesn't bring us anything of value. People are looking for meaning today. And so they want to change and they don't know what to change to. Well, the best thing is to, if you think you're attracted to a specific industry, go ahead and interview people who are in that industry and get a reaction. Figure out, you're going to feel it in your gut if it is something that you're truly interested in or not.
Yeah, you will lean forward in your chair. Your face ignites a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's critical. So there are challenges, certainly, in today's world. It's hard to get in front of somebody, but there are ways around that if you're willing to do the work to get there. And the opportunities, interestingly enough, one of the things that I've found today is that the economy is really very strange. There are lots of people being laid off, especially this past week. We've had news from TELUS, from Bell, from so many people that are so many large companies that are laying people off. But at the same time, there are a lot of organizations that are hiring. So the health industry, for example, the health sector is desperate for people. The hospitality industry as well is desperate for people. So if that's if either of those are of interest to you, then certainly there are opportunities there. And I truly believe that there are opportunities everywhere. It's like trying to sell your house. It only takes one person who's interested. And that's all it takes. So keep that in mind. And with that, JoAnne, we're going to continue right after the break. So JoAnne, so far this conversation has been absolutely scintillating. Go ahead. You wanted to say something?
Oh, I was just saying it's fun.
It's fun. Well, you know what? I think the job search should be fun, and I hope to make it fun for the course I'm launching in September. It's why it's called How to Make Your Job Search Fun and Land the Job You Want. So I've got different ways of doing that.
Perfect.
But when you talk to job seekers, what do you think are some of the most common mistakes that they make, and what can they do to avoid those mistakes?
Well, I'm not going to belabor this, but definitely knowing themselves, making a list of their transferable skills, especially if they're an entry-level person or a new arrival. Everyone has skills that they've learned in the past that can be transferred to job, like organizational skills, interpersonal skills, management skills, communication, customer service. All of those are very, very employable. That they're dedicated, honest, all of those kinds of things. So knowing themselves that way, knowing what strengths they have and what skills, reading the skills that are needed in a job, and then embellishing the fact that they have those skills with stories. A lot of I see that they're not preparing for their interviews. So writing the answers to interview questions, really important. Even if the interviewer never asks those questions, that person is going to be more solidified in who they are and be able to express. The other thing, being an educator, I'm right now reading a lot of resumes and job applications. They're not aligning the job with their letter and their resume. They're not aligned. So they're not taking what's needed, the criteria that's needed, and putting in a cover letter. If they even do a cover letter, which is critical because most people don't. So you want to be in the top 10%, not anybody else. You have to think what's going to make it more reasonable. And depending on the job, sometimes it's the letter that gets read totally, whereas the resume only gets read maybe that much by a scanner looking for the keywords that you've used or gotten from the ad and put into your resume. The other thing too is in a resume, people are writing a profile in a paragraph. Now, maybe AI will read a paragraph, but a human won't. So that skills summary or the profile needs to be the first thing the interviewer sees after the contact information, and has to be in bullet points. So phrases listing your key strengths and skills, accomplishments that the employer wants to hear, and they have to be aligned with the ad. The last thing I want to mention is there can not be any grammatical errors in any part of the application.
Or spelling mistakes.
Well, that too.
Yeah.
Spelling, punctuation, capitalization, grammar, sentences, even, if in the profile, if you're using phrases, you do not put a period after a phrase. It's not a sentence. So, and I'm getting really fussy. But
no, I get you. And you also, if you it's imperative if you have a series of bullets, if you're not putting a period in one and you are putting it in the other, that's also a mistake.
that's
It
right.
has to be consistent throughout.
It has to be. And same with your headings. The headings draw the eye. So the only color I put on my own resume are the major headings. And it's always a navy blue or a fairly common color. And I'm not going to put chartreuse in there.
Sadly,
it's not as professional, but hey, for someone going into fine arts or design or something like that, go for it. But you don't want to stand out too much. You just need to have the right information in there, and it has to be error-free.
Mm-hmm.
I lost a job because I had one error that the interviewer saw. Mm-hmm. And he said, "This is an indication you're not detail-oriented." And I went, "Oh, gee,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
I tell people that it takes most people in HR maybe 7 or even hiring managers 7 or 8 seconds to go through a resume. It takes me 2 seconds because I see those things immediately.
Yes.
And then it either goes in the pile or it stays on my desk. Would you say that these are some of the things that applicants are doing that puts them in the no pile, or are there other things as well?
Well, definitely these would put them in the no pile.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're not preparing for their resumes. They're also not qualified for the job. Mm. Out of 100, I used to do recruiting for a client of mine, and I would post a position, and within a few hours, there'd be 100 applications. Excuse me. So I would ask for a cover letter describing why they felt they deserved this job, what made them unique, etc., and to tell me more, because the letter is different from the resume. The resume is just your history. It's a synopsis of a summary of your history, but your letter goes into more about your personality and how you would fit into their culture and whether they feel aligned and why they feel this is the greatest job. Some employers will only read the letter and then glance at the resume afterwards. If a person doesn't know themselves well enough, they're not going to be able to communicate. But definitely errors, not knowing themselves, and saying, yes, I work with machines. I've had 2 years experience with machines, whereas in the ad it said 3 to 5 years working with a CNC machine. So they're just saying, yeah, machines, coffee makers, I can do machines. No, you can't. And in my, out of 100 people that applied for the job I was recruiting for, it was hard. I was hard pressed to find 10 that I narrowed it down to interview for that first interview. Then I would chop it down to 3, and then the employer would choose 1 out of 3. If you don't qualify for at least 80% of the qualifications listed, it's not a job for you. You're wasting your time and the employer's time.
That's what I tell people, 75 to 80%. Absolutely. So, but speaking about going back again to knowing yourself and consistency across things, today everybody's using social media. So whether it's for networking or to increase their chances of landing a job, what do you think people can do to enhance their brand, if you will? I mean, I did a whole podcast on branding for job search, but I think it's still worth mentioning that it's part of the job search process. So what is critical for people to know about the use of social media during this time?
If you're looking for a professional type of job, LinkedIn is probably your best social media platform to use. And there is an option to, yes, I'm looking for a job, but people aren't putting their profile in. So, or it's not professionally written. And when I say professionally written, I don't mean getting somebody else to write about you, although that's an option, but to give a summary of who you are, what you're looking for, and that kind of thing. So LinkedIn is very important, having a banner that has a wonderful picture of you. Definitely not necessarily a selfie on a beach with all your other friends in the background. That's not appropriate.
To that point, I would say it's worth spending the money to get a professional photo taken for LinkedIn. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. And then, Facebook.
Not for job search,
not for job search.
But I think maybe not so much in Canada, but certainly in the US and possibly elsewhere as well, employers may look you up on social media. So you have to be very, very careful about what you say.
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
They will check 2 or 3 of your platforms that you're using.
Yeah.
Instagram, that kind of thing. Like you said, you have to be very, very careful what you put in. But sending an email or sending a blast to your friends on Facebook, saying, or a group that you belong to, and letting them know that this is the kind of job I'm looking for. A lot of my previous students will email me and say, I'm looking for a job. Can I use you as a reference? And I have always said, if I know you well, and I keep all my records so I can always look back, of course I will be a reference for you. But then I say, what kinds of jobs are you applying for? And please send me your resume, because I want to make sure that I feel aligned when I'm talking to an employer about this wonderful candidate. And so that's another thing. People don't think of their instructors or their coaches, even their sports coaches, if they've never had a job before. And a lot of Gen Zs who are up to about 22, 23 years of age right now, some of them have been prevented from part-time jobs because of their culture, or mom and dad want them to study, not work. I've had a job since I was 10. So
wow.
and it wasn't babysitting. I ran a legitimate newspaper delivery business.
There you go.
I even had some employees back in the day, and and I have always worked all the way through. So it's just a matter of knowing, letting all your relatives know. That's another social media way of, but being specific, being complete in your message. I'm looking for a job that involves this, not just looking for a job that suits my values and my career goals. What are they? Exactly. So that I can help you.
And being consistent across all your social media. One thing that people don't always understand, and one of the reasons I love LinkedIn, besides the fact that it's a professional network and reaches many more people and has more opportunities for reaching more people, is that you can describe yourself in the first person. So you're meant to describe yourself in the first person.
That's
so and that's, I think, an advantage. I mean, I recently read the profile of somebody I used to work with in the career transition space, and the entire profile was written in the third person. It really is an opportunity to talk about yourself in a way that shows your passion, that shows your interest in whatever it is that you are doing or want to do.
I totally agree.
I'd like to talk about a couple of things before we break. We're not going to have time to talk about so many things, but there are things like how to prepare for interviews, because we've talked about preparing for the interview, practicing and so on. But there are different kinds of interviews. For example, you can have an interview online. It could be just a what do you call it when you just I can't find my words.
Your initial interview.
Initial interview, let's call it that. Yeah. Or a behavioral interview. Or you could, I had a client who all of a sudden walked into an interview and there were two people there being interviewed by a panel of people. So it wasn't just her and a panel, which happens sometimes and can scare people, but there were two people being evaluated at the same time in the same room by the same panel.
Yeah, not my favorite kind of interview.
No.
I've never experienced that. And, it's a timing issue, but it's also, how do you work under pressure?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know yourself so well that it doesn't matter what the other person says, because this is about you when you are talking about your time. Mm-hmm. So and I've never been in that kind of panel. And like I said, not my favorite. But sometimes you got a panel of interviewers. I've had up to 10 people interviewing me.
Wow.
And
that's also pressure. That's also pressure. You're absolutely right. It is about how you handle pressure. And so that means the kind of job you're applying for will put you under pressure and under stress. So you have to recognize that going in. That's excellent. Yes, absolutely. The other thing that sometimes people are worried about is negotiating, or often the other way around. Negotiating a salary could be like completely, we could spend an hour on that. How do people cope with rejection and feedback when they don't get the job that they've applied for? And how can they maintain a positive mindset? Let's end with a positive mindset.
Okay. So I always look at every situation as positive. So even if something has gone wrong, like I didn't get the job, it's what did I learn from that interview? What did I learn about that company? What have I learned about that person who interviewed me, so that I can keep that in my mind and get rid of anything negative? So it truly is a mindset, but also I write down who interviewed me. What was the positive things that I learned, so that I've got a little, if I ever need to go back and get another interview, or I want to approach that person for another job someday, I've got the notes, but I also, by writing it down, again, you're using more senses. And so you're seeing what you're thinking, and you have a better feeling. And I always, this might sound weird, even when I've been rejected, I send a thank you letter.
You have to.
I send a thank you. Thank you for letting me know that you've not chosen me. Although I'm very disappointed, I learned so much from you about the company, and I will be grateful for that. And I hope that your selection turns out to be the right one. Yeah. And amen. It's like
absolutely
this long, but it thanks them for the time they said you didn't get the job.
So it's okay to feel a little down at first because you've had a rejection, but all it takes is one. So really it's about learning from the experience and getting better for the next experience. The other thing about thank you notes, I once applied for a job, and it was like they were supposed to answer me within 3 to 5 days, and it was 14 days I hadn't heard from them. I sent them a handwritten thank you note in the mail. I got a call the next day, and don't belittle thank you notes. JoAnne, I want to thank you so much, but I would be remiss if we didn't end by mentioning your book again, and the fact that you are giving one away for free. So if anybody is interested in, what is the title again, please?
How to Find Your Ideal Job in a New Country, a detailed guide for international students. I know it's a long title, but you know what you're going to get in that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's not just good for international students, because you have so many fantastic examples and exercises and templates in there that it would be valuable for anybody who's in the job search. The other thing I'd like to tell you all about right now is my upcoming course, the not so ordinary job search formula, how to make your job search fun and land the job you want. More about that in my next podcast. I look forward to seeing you then. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Reinventing You with me, your host, Danielle Silverman. Tune in on the second and fourth Monday each month at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on transformationtalkradio.com. Join me and feel inspired and optimistic about your future. We only get one life, so embrace change and thrive with me. Find work that aligns best with your soul and what you enjoy. For more information, go to reinventingu.com.